Hello, everyone. This is Gary with Fed League Flash with a lot of help from my guest. And thank you. Um, anyway, we're giving this a try. Again, technologically, I'm a moron. But anyway, we're doing our first interview here on the Fed League Flash, and I'm talking to someone who has been in the hockey world for quite a while. And he was doing podcasting for minor league hockey before podcasting was even a thing or even a term. So this was one of the reasons why I wanted to bring him on. Um, he also is the creator and I guess you could say curator in some ways
Yeah.
of binghamtonhockey.net, which is a web page all dedicated towards hockey in Binghamton, New York, and he's also a very good friend. So here he is. This is Bob Howard, the host of the Power Play Post Show. Thank you for coming on, and I really appreciate it.
Well, Gary, thank you very much for having me, being a part of the Fed League Flash, and your first guest. I'm honored. Thank you very much.
And not a problem. I'm thrilled to do this, and it's been something I've been thinking about doing for a while. So, but you can be the guinea pig.
Perfect.
So anyway, yeah, kind of wanted to just kind of pick your brain for a few minutes with
Sure.
some things. First of all, I would love to find out because you've talked about some things a little bit on the Power Play Post Show as far as starting that show, but I and being that podcasting really wasn't a thing then. How
No.
did you get started? What was your inspiration uh, for starting a podcast dedicated to minor pro hockey?
Well, there's about 5 years of history before I actually started the show in 2004. Um, First of all, for the people that don't know, podcast became a word in 2004. Adam Curry, who used to be a DJ for MTV, or a VJ, as you like to call it, he actually is probably one of the first guys to be called the podfather of podcasting. And what's interesting about that is in '99, I started a website called thewrestleronline.com, which really just dealt with all of my love for pro wrestling. I grew up watching pro wrestling with my brother, and so I started the website. And a couple years later, in 2001, I started a basically an internet radio show, right? Because we didn't have a name for it then. There was no name for podcasting or what podcasters did at that time. So I started an internet radio show, right? Because it was a radio show that was basically going to be on the internet. And it was called the Extreme Wrestling Audio Show. Very simple, very easy. Extreme was big back then because of ECW out of Philadelphia. And so I started that show with a couple friends, and it turned into a new show called Huracan Radio. That became really popular because, again, not many people were doing this. I mean, when
Hmm.
podcasting started in 2004 with the name itself, podcast, not many people were doing it then. There wasn't that many people that literally uh, talked on the internet for people. Most of shows that you would have to hear, you'd have to turn on the regular radio and listen to it and stuff. So I learned, being the inquisitive person with computers and software, I basically went and just started figuring out all the details of how to do it, what software to use. I actually still have the software today that I used back then to record all
Wow.
my shows. Um, there was a company called Real Audio, and basically Real Audio really kind of really popularized the ability to stream, and that's what started happening in 2004 was the streaming aspect of this. And
Hmm.
it's not streaming like people think about it today. It was done a little bit differently. You had to create two different files, and you had to put these files up, and you had to click on a link on the internet, and then it would start basically downloading it into a temp folder on your computer for your audio player to start playing. And then when the MP3s came out, that changed the game completely. So I started in 2001, did the wrestling show for 3 years, And then when it got too popular, and back then there was something called bandwidth. You had to pay for bandwidth. You had to actually
Mhm.
pay a hosting company for the bandwidth. And we got a check one day, my wife and I, and it was for well over $300. And it was like, oh crap, I can't do this no more. I'm not. I'm not a frugal kind of guy. As you can see, all the stuff behind us. We definitely we have no kids and we pay for whatever we want and get whatever we want. But I also don't like to overdo things where it might, create issues for my wife and I, right? So I
Right.
immediately stopped the show. I was like, nope, gotta stop doing the show. 6 months later, she was like, you got to go back to creating stuff again because I was unbearable. Probably I was probably doing projects and screwing up things at the house, that type of thing. And she probably wanted me to get back to creating and being a creative person. I'm a Libra. I'm in the middle of Libra, October 12th, which is going to be a special day coming up for the Binghamton Black Bears, as we all know. And so I started BinghamtonHockey.net. That was the first aspect of it. I was like, there's nothing chronicling Binghamton hockey. I love Binghamton
No.
hockey. Been a fan since the Whaler days. Never went to any Duster games, but a couple Whaler games throughout many, many, many of the years. And so I started BinghamtonHockey.net. And then I was like, man, but I miss doing the radio show, right? It's like, I want to do that. So realistically, it was just an easy avenue. I'd already had all the software, the technology. I was in a band back in the 90s, so I had all the microphones I needed. I had a big, huge mixing board, much bigger one than I have now, which you might be able to see in the screen right here. It's a
A little
smaller
bit.
one. I have a Pyle. It's called Pyle, Pyle, and much smaller than the old Tascam that I had. And I also had
Oh.
a mixing board, a power mixer from the 70s that I used in the first few years, which was crazy. The thing was huge. It was about as big as this desk that I'm sitting in front of right now. And I just started it. And I started with Grady Wittenberg, the voice of the Binghamton Senators. He was my first guest, and he was on for, I think it was 3 straight seasons. We did a segment all about the Binghamton Senators with him. I had a gentleman named Dave Wolf out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. So he covered the Wild Wild West. We called it the Wild Wild West Report. And so we were covering the AHL through and through for 11 years. And it was great. Interviewed well over 500 players, well over 500 to 600 beat writers and broadcasters, people, personnel with teams, all in the American Hockey League. And the funny thing is, when I stopped in 2015, there was maybe 2 or 3 people doing the same thing I was about the AHL. So even though it had grown, and the best part was, I didn't call myself a podcast ever until I came back in 2023. Because podcasting, when it came out, even though Adam Curry from MTV fame was doing it, there was a misconception or a connotation, a bad connotation about podcasters. Guys that were down in their mom's basement and they were fat and ugly and couldn't talk about anything but conspiracy theories. That's what podcasting was. That's how people looked at it back then. And the same thing for bloggers. They said the same thing about bloggers. If you were a blogger, you were crazy and insane and stuff like that. So when I talk to people about internet media, right, and I think this is something that's very important, there are people that are doing it today that I told them, don't call it a blog, don't call it a podcast, call it a radio show on the internet, call it that you're a writer. You write about this team. 100 Degree Hockey is the perfect example of that. When Stephen Meserve started that website, he had blogging about the Texas Stars. And I said, take all that stuff off. You want to get noticed? There's no permanent writer working at a newspaper in Austin, Texas, writing about the Texas Stars. So you're the only one that's doing that. Within a year, the radio play-by-play broadcaster for the Texas Stars calls me up and says, hey, this guy, Steve Meserve, just put in a media request to become media. I said, absolutely, 100%. He's a great writer. Did you read his stuff? Oh, yeah, it's great stuff. I just wanted to make sure that he was on board. Because at that time, I was the only person in the internet that was getting credentials to AHL hockey games. They weren't people weren't getting it because it was a new form of coverage for the AHL.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so it kind of blew up. There's a lot of avenues to the story and to what I've done, and it's funny. No one's going to write a story about me. No one's going to write an article about me and put it on Wikipedia. But I was there in 2001, well before 2004, when podcast started in February, or the name was created, doing this kind of stuff and kind of bring it to the forefront and giving people the ability to do it about the minor leagues, whether it be
Right.
baseball, hockey, or D League basketball, which there are podcasts for that now.
Right. Yeah. I think that obviously you and I are kind of facing uh, more of a grassroots perspective, I guess, now with the Fed,
Yeah,
in that there hasn't been a whole lot out there for FPHL. We're starting to see a couple of guys do it now for teams, but
yeah,
it's still pretty new concept for a league that fair enough, you know, it's new itself.
yeah.
But yeah,
15th year coming up for the Fed,
exactly,
and they're still trying to
exactly.
figure things out, making mistakes as they go along. That's just normal. I mean, that's gonna. I mean, if anyone thought in the 1940s that the AHL was doing everything correctly, no, they weren't. They had less
Yeah.
teams, but they weren't doing everything correctly, and they had to learn. They went into markets that they shouldn't have gone into. And then the markets that lasted, the Rochesters, the Hersheys, the Springfields, the Providences, those worked because, just like in Binghamton, why hockey has worked in Binghamton for 52 years is because there was a community set up immediately in the first 4 or 5
Right,
years
right.
that created this lore about hockey in Binghamton that you could talk about with almost anyone. You say
Hmm.
something about hockey in Binghamton, they bring up the Dusters, they bring up the Whalers. They know certain things, even if they haven't been to a game. And that's because we're a small community that rallied around the Dusters in the first four or
Hmm.
5 years, to the point where now hockey here can succeed in any league. I truly believe you can put the ECHL, the AHL, the Fed, or the SP here, and it will succeed. You will get 3,000 plus fans every single night, no matter what. And
Yeah.
maybe the times have changed when it comes to making money or breaking even or losing money, of whether it's 3,000 fans, 3,500 fans, or 4,000 fans, depending on which league you're in. But I think it can happen. If there was ever a
Yeah.
scenario where the New York Rangers brought back the Binghamton Rangers to the AHL or the ECHL, guarantee you 4,000 plus fans every single night.
No, sure,
Guarantee.
sure, absolutely. There's no question on my mind that that's one of the reasons why Andreas and Don Kiernan looked at Binghamton in the first place.
Yes.
With what you're doing, go back a few years, the
Sure.
Binghamton Devils pull out. So there's now a void in Binghamton. Uh, Andreas comes in, brings the Black Bears
Mm-hmm.
to the community, announces the Black Bears, the FPHL, introduces the Fed to Binghamton. Um, what was your initial take on the new team, and how long did it take for them to kind of win you over?
That's a tough question because I didn't know anything about the Fed. I remembered in 2010, 2011, when they tried to bring the BC Barons, I think it was, here to
Mhm.
Binghamton. They were going to play at the Polar Cap, which was the first mistake they made right there.
Yeah.
They should have played at the BCC Ice Center just because it's warmer there. People would be happy to go there. The Polar Cap, which is now I think the Shenango Ice House or whatever they're calling it these days, is a fridge. It's a freezer,
Yeah.
and it's always been a great place to go and practice and play hockey, without a doubt. I'm not going to argue against that. It just wasn't the right fit. In
Right.
Binghamton, as much as I say they can support hockey, they can support any level of hockey. Having two teams, they're going to decide on the AHL over the Fed any day. So
Right.
that didn't surprise me that had to pull out. I think they went to Long Island, if I remember correctly.
Cape Cod.
Cape Cod. Sorry, I knew it was over on the East Coast somewhere. Just when they brought it back, I just still wasn't I still wasn't sure. And what I did was I watched every single game on YouTube, and I think it was sometime through half of the season. Rod Davidson was the head coach, and I just realized that I enjoyed watching the fans. Even on YouTube, you can see the fans, you can see the
Mhm.
reactions, you can hear the reactions, and just because of the vantage points that Binghamton has in their arena for camera angles and stuff like that, you can see it, and I could see that the fans were growing more and more in love with the team, and
Mhm.
so that's what wins me over. If you can get the fans on board, I'm on board. And Andreas definitely did that. And
Mhm.
though the first two seasons didn't provide the results, I think at the end, which is really they built all three of the teams to win championships. Okay.
Right.
But the first two, I think, fell a little short because of this issue with Danbury, right? This relationship with Danbury that is tough. It is hard. Danbury thinks that they are the big fish in a very small pond. And in the minor hockey league world, Binghamton's a top 10 city in minor league hockey, even in the
Right.
Fed. Even
Right.
in the
Well,
Fed.
which is kind of interesting because when the Fed started, Danbury was the big fish.
And they still think they are. And that's okay. But it puts a chip on their shoulder, right? Because they didn't have the Dusters. They didn't have 15, 20, 30 years of the AHL. They didn't have the 2011 Calder Cup champions. So they're always going to have a chip on their shoulder. The ownership group, the fans there, when they see Binghamton come into town, they're going to be like, I'm the little brother that wants to kick the big brother in the nets. And that's the truth. Um, and they can either admit it or not admit it, but that's the relationship. And when Binghamton failed to beat Danbury in those first 2 years, it fueled the fire for Danbury. It's like, yeah, we're kicking the crap out of the Black Bears in Binghamton, New York, right? But then the roles reversed, obviously, in season 3, as we all
Mhm. Yep. Yes, indeed. So you're pretty much in the same boat as I was as far as
know. Mm-hmm.
watching on YouTube with uh maybe distant curiosity, but then warmed up to it pretty quick.
Yeah, yeah, and what was interesting is there was the 50 years of Binghamton hockey that Ian Mills produced for Fox 40, and I was already in the process of bringing Binghamton Hockey.net back and getting
Mm,
and updating it and getting all the information, and I realized I was really enjoying the product on the ice. I was really enjoying the Black Bears themselves and the broadcast. And Rob Lapolis did the first season, and then Brooks Hill came in for season 2, and he's been here for season 3, and I just really enjoyed everything about it. And so in 2023, I was like, God, I think this is the right time. I've warned people, I've threatened people multiple times. I'm going to bring back the Power Play post show, and then I did, and it
mm,
just seemed to be the right time, the right fit for I think everybody involved, whether it was the team, the players, the ownership group there with Andreas. He opened his arms. Brant Sherwood, same thing. Just I've never had a head coach open up the door to that office as many times as Brant has to have me come in and to just get involved. The Black Bears organization themselves is one of the biggest reasons why I've bought
mm.
into the Fed and bought into the Black Bears. They're just outstanding people from
Yeah,
every single person that works there.
agreed. You're starting to kind of lead into my next question here. As I was
Sure.
going to ask, to describe a little bit about that process. Uh, I know you stopped the show
Yeah.
just due to your work situation and things going on in your personal lives. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, so not just with the Black Bears being a bit of a catalyst, but describe a little bit more about the thought process as far as it's time to come back with the show.
I missed it a lot, Gary. I'll be honest with you. Getting to know the players as well as I did, and there's some players I still talk to today from that time period. I missed it. I'm a creative person.
Mm,
I've always been a creative person, musician, artist, photographer. I love the. I may not be the best at any of those things, but I love doing them, and it
mm,
makes me happy. It's my joy. And I got to be honest with you, after bringing it back, after making the decision, I'm going to do this again. In the first three episodes, I had no guests. It was just me. I was just talking. Nobody knows what I was really talking about or what I was about, but they started listening. First episode got like 24 listens. I was like, yes. I was just happy that someone actually listened. And to me, I was just excited about that. Now,
mm.
when a show hits in the first day like 100 listens, I'm like, okay, this is good. This means I can do
Yeah.
something with this. But it's all about this passion to create and my love for Binghamton hockey. I think I love Binghamton hockey as much as Eddie did, as much as YMCA Dave, the Calder Cup twins that were there at the games for the longest time until the Redcoats kicked them out. Um, as much as almost any of the fans that sat in that arena, I think I love Binghamton hockey as much as them, without a doubt. And it just made me want to do something to kind of give back to the community. They can listen to the shows and hear me talk about the Fed or hockey or interview a player and everything. But it's what I love to do. And I've always said, you have to find passion in your life. It's the
Mm,
only way you can live life to the fullest is find something that you're so passionate about and you just do it. It's either going to make
yeah.
you a lot of money or it's going to make you very happy. One of the two.
Exactly. No money here.
Right. I mean, I've never made a dime from doing this. And I've talked about it
No.
recently. It's like, yeah, maybe a merch store should, pop open, for the Power Play Post show or whatever. I do have, the stickers, with the new logo and stuff
There you
that
go.
EJ Worth, one of the greatest things, you talk about why I did this,
Mm,
the people
mm,
with the Black Bears, they're awesome. EJ designed this for me. EJ Worth, who designs all the
nice.
great stuff for the Binghamton Black Bears, he did this for me and everything. And now I printed stickers. I can give print stickers out, for free
Nice.
and everything because it doesn't cost that much to get print stickers made up, right? But I can do
Right.
that and everything. It's all about passion.
Exactly. Exactly. Running a little short on time, but I do want to ask you one very important question.
Yeah.
Your gut feeling on the Black Bears this upcoming season, can they repeat?
Yes. I think it's an easy answer. Yes, they can. It's whether or not they will. So, why were the Black Bears good last year? Let me ask you that first. I'll put my interviewer's hat back on. Why do you think the Black Bears were so good last year?
I think, well, two things. One is that everyone in the locker room was on the same page from day one.
That's,
That was
that's
the
number
biggest
one.
thing.
That's
Yeah.
number one.
Number two, they had excellent offense and excellent defense and excellent goaltending.
Yep.
They got the right people in that were talented enough to win, and they won.
Who is the greatest head coach ever in the NFL? Take
I'm
take bias aside because most people are
yeah.
biased against the New England Patriots, right? But Bill Belichick is the greatest head coach in the history of the NFL. He's won more Super Bowl championships than anybody. And yeah, when Tom left, everything fell apart. I totally get that, and I agree. But it's exactly it's that played out exactly how I knew it was going to. So great head coaches, what they do is they create a system. And in that
Mhm.
system, every single person, if they buy in, that's the key thing, right? Do you buy into the
Yes.
system? Buy into the system. You can plug that person into any part of that system, and guess what? They'll succeed. The fact that Oliveri would go from defense to offense, offense to defense, Jesse Anderson, offense, defense, back and
Mhm.
forth, right? Those guys bought into what Brant Sherwood was saying. All the players on that team Even Nikita Ivashkin and Tommy Ray, when they were there, they bought
Mhm.
into it until they didn't buy into it, right? And
Yeah,
then they
yeah,
left, right?
right.
It's that simple. But everybody who won that cup, whose name's going to be on the plaque, and I have seen the plaque. I was sent a picture of the plaque. I've seen it. I don't. I'm sure it's on there probably now since I've seen it. They all bought in. That's number one. Having
Mhm.
good character people in the locker room. I've seen this, 2011 with the Binghamton Senators. They were all great people. And they also bought into Coach Kurt Kleinendorf's system. So without a doubt, what it really comes down to is do you buy into the system? Do you have a good system in place? Right?
Yeah,
And do you have the players that can execute? Execution is so key and so
yes.
important. And then they had leadership, right? From
Mhm.
Brant to Tyson to Jesse to JT Walters, they had a leadership process that was just excellent. And they're going to have 15 returning players coming back next year.
Yeah,
Out of their 19 that can be on the roster, 15 of them are coming back in some sort of fashion, right?
right.
And then you're going to bring in a few extra guys. I mean, I'm not going to tell you who, but there's some extra guys that are coming in that have some experience. You have some great rookies that are already coming in. I think you could build a whole line of Morrisville State college players. Cam Clark has brought in a couple of his buddies to
Mhm.
potentially try out for maybe the third line. Blake Tosto is going to have a phenomenal season. He's the guy to really look out for. He might go from having 7 goals, 4 assists, 11 points to he could have 35 goals. He could be the guy
Yeah,
that replaces
yeah,
a Connor Smith because Connor Smith is possibly not coming back, right?
right.
Kyle Stefan might be playing up in the SPHL. So you have places now that need to be filled. And the one thing I'm going to say, and I know
Mm.
this sounds like I'm sucking up, Brant Sherwood is good with X's and O's, breaking video, and recruiting. That
Yes.
is key in the SPHL and the FPHL, and even the ECHL to a degree. The
Mhm.
NHL does everything for the NHL and the AHL, but the ECHL, they have to recruit like 75% of their players.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
coaches do, right? They get
right.
a little bit of help from the NHL. So it really does come down to, I think they already have the pieces in place to repeat.
Agreed, agreed. Well, it's been wonderful having you on. This is Bob Howard. He is the host again of the Power Play Post Show. You can listen to that on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio. I wrote it down so I wouldn't miss anyone. Uh, and
You want to
also, oh, there we go. There we go.
To me, this is
He's,
the coolest thing ever, right here. Having both
yeah,
of these hats and being there and being media to cover both of those was great. Gary, you're awesome. What you have done in this last couple years with the Fed League Flash, how much you've built it up. A lot of people are lucky if they have 100 followers, right? And you've built it up so you over all the different media platforms, almost 1,000 people, maybe even more than 1,000 people now are paying attention. Close to 2,000. See, I didn't know the number had grown that much, and that's key. It's huge. It's amazing. The work you've done has been phenomenal. Been honored to have you on my show, and we'll continue to do that in the next season. We're in season 14 right now, which is great. But at least for us, season 14 if you do the chronicle logical thing. But thank
yeah.
you very much for having me on, especially as your first guest.
Yes, thank you. I again appreciate you being the guinea pig, and we'll get the bugs worked out and have some other guests on in the future. Again, Bob, thank you so much. Appreciate it, and keep doing the great work that you're doing.
You too.
Looking forward to hearing more in the future.
Awesome. Gary, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
fans, check us out.
All right.